Okay, so I don't want to freak you out, but property prices may have increased far more than they're actually being reported. Stats from the CSO, Daft and Myhome are hiding the true picture of inflation in the housing market in Dublin and in Ireland. According to the CSO's latest stats, National Residential Price Index has increased by 1.5% in the last 12 months up to July of 2023. Prices in Dublin have actually decreased by 1.4%, and prices outside of Dublin have increased by 3.8%. Daft's latest average asking price report in Q3 of 2023 is that the typical asking prices increased by 3.7% since this time last year. Prices in Dublin have increased by 1.4% in the last year, but price inflation has slowed down a little bit, according to Daft. Myhome has reported that the average asking price has inflated by 4.1% nationally, and this is the second successive quarter of large increases, but buyers are paying a premium of up to 3% above the asking price in September. Property prices in Dublin, according to myhome.ie, have increased by about $7,000 in the last quarter. The Myhome report in Q3 2023, in association with Davy Stockbrokers, showed that the median asking price for property in the country is now $425,000. The mean price has increased by about $5,000 since this time last year. The Myhome report suggests that the asking prices have increased by about 2.2%, which doesn't add up with some of the percentages we've just heard from. So the report itself is a little bit confusing. So you have the CSO at a price increase of 1.5%, but falling in Dublin. You have Daft at a 1.1% increase, but also suggesting that asking prices are gone up by 3.7%. Myhome are at 2.2%, but increases have gone up by, I think, 4.1%. Property prices in Dublin have increased by $7,000 during Q3. All of this doesn't quite add up in terms of percentage-wise, so I'm getting more and more confused in terms of what's coming out on these reports and these average data stacks. And it is kind of confusing because the CSO is working off sold prices, Daft and Myhome are working off average asking prices, but they seem to shift between quarter figures and yearly figures all the time, and it doesn't quite match up in terms of the overall percentages, particularly when you're saying Dublin has gone up by $7,000 in the last quarter, but that doesn't quite tie in with the percentages in terms of the average asking price in Dublin as well. So it is all confusing, but I'm going to perhaps add even more confusion to it, and I think prices have increased even more than what they're being suggested here. So anyone who is a long-time viewer will know that I'm not overly keen on average indexes in terms of determining value. Indexes are not a great method, or not a method at all, for valuing an individual property like a house. And the issue with Daft, Myhome and even the CSO data is the data points that are making up the index. As explained, Myhome and Daft work off the asking price average. Daft and Myhome openly admit that the numbers of properties that are being listed on their websites is down, and sometimes down as much as 38% since pre-pandemic. So this means the data sets that they're actually working off have been reduced considerably, which is going to skew some of the numbers. Myhome and Daft advertise or list and collect their data from new homes and second-hand homes that are on their website. However, more and more homes are being sold as part of portfolios or large blocks between investment funds, and those never actually land on the portals like Myhome or Daft, and therefore they're not part of their data stack. Housing bodies and councils are buying entire developments directly from developers, and these properties are not being captured again in the likes of Daft or Myhome's asking prices. Housing bodies and councils are buying partly finished developments or buildings that can be converted into apartment blocks, pumping hundreds of thousands, sometimes 400 or 500,000 to create 1-bed and 2-bedroom units. And this spend to deliver these units is not being captured, or these final costs are not being captured again in any of the Daft or Myhome figures. The CSO will capture some of these sales within their figures, but they are missing the true costs associated with delivering these houses from housing bodies and councils, because they are spending millions over and above what they've actually spent on buying the actual property. The biggest factor of all is the type of houses that have been sold over the last few years. that are making up this data. Anyone who's been looking to buy a property over the last 3 years will know that many of the properties coming up are perhaps probate sales, which means the property will need a hell of a lot of work, or landlords selling their apartments, which also are probably outdated, need a lot of work, and are part of a rental cap, which will impact their value. Very few new homes are hitting the market, way less than before. This is also going to have an impact on the data. Most of the homes that are being bought right now need a lot of work, and people are spending hundreds and thousands on top of what they've actually paid for the property. Again, this is not being reflected in the indexes or the true value or true cost associated with the property. Only about 2% of the housing stock is traded in any 1 year. If that 2% reflects a fair spread of the overall market, it paints a very clear picture. But if that 2% is traded, is only probate sales, landlords selling up, i.e. you're scraping the bottom of the barrel, and in some cases even as much as 40% of the sales last year were landlords selling up, this is going to have an impact because those properties are impacted by the rental cap, which will have an impact on their value, and this in turn impacts the quality of data that's going in to create these indexes that is producing these figures. And this is why I think the average indexes from Myhome, Daft and the CSO are actually way off. Perhaps some of you guys can add to some of this, but I'm personally seeing some properties sell on streets in Ranelagh that would have sold for about 800,000 a year ago. Now this year or this summer selling for as much as 985,000. I'm seeing 2 beds up in Sandyford that would have been selling for about 450 a year ago, sell for 525. I'm seeing 4 beds in Dublin 18 that would have sold for 620 maybe last year, achieving as much as 700 this summer. These are 10 and 15% increases for good homes that are ready to be moved into in less than a year. This is not happening everywhere, but some properties have increased or skyrocketed in value over the last year, far in excess of what the indexes are suggesting property prices have increased by. This is another reminder that property is local and you need to look at local sales to get a true picture of your area. This video is just food for thought. Hopefully it gave you something to think about. If it did, please hit that like button. As always, thanks for watching.